and it's something that I've discussed with skating friends over the years as adults, like looking back on our skating careers. A lot of my friends that I met in the rink are still my friends today. And we all talk about how we don't have a fear of messing up in the same way that we see in some of our other friends and colleagues that don't skate. We joke all the time that, you fall down, you get up and you do it again. Or you're at a competition, you fall down, the music does not stop. You can't get off the ice. You have to keep going, even if you fall down 7 times in that program.
Hello, this is Jim Copple with the Legacy Podcast Project. Today we're talking with Deborah Spence, who is an Assistant Director at the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services for the U.S. Department of Justice in the United States. We are honored to have her with us. Deborah is a colleague, a friend. She's also a professional ice skater and a professional ice skating judge. She brings a lot of insights, has a rich history, and a great tradition to pass on to the next generation. We're honored to have you here, Debs.
We're talking with Deborah Spence. I know her as Debs. I've known Deb for about 14 years. She works at the U.S. Department of Justice. And we're interviewing her today on the Legacy Project. And Deb, give us a little information about your background, where you went to school, what you studied.
Sure. I grew up outside of Philadelphia. Went to a small school run by Moravians. And it was a school that was founded by a woman, and I think that actually was influential in how, although the school was co-ed when I attended it, really set expectations of, the girls that went through that school had all the same possibilities as all the boys who did. And it was also a very old school. I was a member of its 250th graduating class, and so that meant that over its long history, they had sent numerous students to study abroad, and I wound up doing my undergraduate degree at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. And I studied really early modern European history, mostly France and Britain, anyway from about the 15th to the 17th century. So, of course, that was obviously why I would wind up working in the criminal justice field today. Actually, I studied that from the point of view of I wanted to go to college and study something that was interesting to me. And I feel that the experience out of it was one of learning to think critically, to read, to communicate and share ideas, and that could apply to anything I wound up doing.
So I tell my friends my degree in medieval history helps me work with Congress.
Yes, exactly.
To what extent, in terms of what you chose to study, did your family have any influence, your parents?
I think only in the sense that they said that if they were paying for this experience, that they wanted me to get the most out of it, and that I would do that if I studied something that I thought was interesting and important to me. My father's a chemical engineer, very, sciences, concrete professional background. My mom is a minister, but no, they didn't. There was no expectation of you have to go to college because whatever you study is what you'll do for a career. That you figure that out separately. Your job right now is to be a good student. You figure out what is your paycheck afterwards. So.
You have brothers, sisters?
I don't. I'm an only child. So I have some slightly older cousins who are like siblings to me. Their kids call me Aunt Debbie, and we grew up very close. But no, I'm an only.
You're an only child. Great. Well, in terms of who you are, what you do now, who are the most important influences in your life? Who are the influencers?
Some of the most important influencers to me were actually coaches. I was a multi-sport athlete growing up, primarily a figure skater, and my coaches in that sport are people who I spent probably as much time with as my own parents. It was something you did 25 hours a week. But I also played, sports through school, and some of those coaches were very influential. Just this past year, my school's field hockey coach retired after decades, and I was reading some of the news stories about it, and I think back of how I didn't necessarily enjoy being a part of that experience. She ran a very tight ship, felt like we ran for miles, and I don't like running. But she was so, her sense of dedication and the way she conveyed that it didn't matter that we were the smallest school in the league, we could be just as competitive because we're going to work hard, At a small school like mine, everybody who goes out for the team is on the team, so it wasn't like she could just select the best possible athletes. She had to make a winning team out of the athletes she had, and she did incredibly successfully over decades, and I think that was a real influence of that hard work matters. And I think for my skating coaches, it was really that's a sport where you fall down all the time. You fall down a lot in practice, you even sometimes in competition. But really in practice, you are falling day in, day out, and your coaches have to help you learn that that's part of the learning process, and that doesn't mean that you're not good at this or that you shouldn't be doing this or that there's no point in this, but to always see but where this is getting you. And I think those sorts of lessons of the value of hard work, of setting yourself a goal and not worrying about how many times you fall down has been huge for me.
Yeah. And you've carried that through in terms of what you do now.
Absolutely.
How you apply it.
I really think as an adult, I want to find how do I make this work? What's the solution? What is the way to get what I want done?
Yeah.
I don't like the simplistic, no, well, okay, if I can't do it that way, maybe there's another way.
Yeah. Your mother was a minister.
Yes.
Was that an influence?
I think in the sense that, she was ordained in the mid-'70s or mid to late 70s when, sure, lots of my friends' fathers were ministers, but almost nobody saw a female minister. So I think in the sense that, she was somebody who, or is, somebody who said, well, this is my calling. All the rest of you think that I shouldn't have this job. Well, I should.
Yeah.
My God has called me to this, so don't tell me I can't. I think that has been incredibly influential. In many ways, she's very much an example of her own generation. And in my lifetime, I've never seen my mom wear jeans because, she wouldn't do that. She's very proper. But I think that career choice and the time frame that she did it was really a sense of...
Yeah, she had to break through a lot of barriers.
Right. Like she applied to seminaries that didn't accept women, and she knew that going in. But it was important to her to make the point that this is what I want to...
Yeah.
This is what I need to do.
Yeah, kind of determination. And again, like you said, so you had a calling.
Yeah.
That overrides a lot of criticism or a lot of other barriers.
Exactly.
In the process. So in terms of what you do, what kind of legacy do you think you want to leave? People around you, your nieces, nephews, or cousins?
It's funny that you asked me this question because just the other week, a longtime coworker left our office for change of career, and we didn't make her leave. She had family and life choices and things to do, and so change of career. But she was somebody that I had originally hired, and then we've moved up through the organization and slightly different paths. But she left me a thank you note for working together over the last 10 years, and she actually said in there something to the effect of, you've always been such an amazing role model to me of a strong woman in the workplace. And I was so proud of that in the sense that she looked up to me as somebody that was an example of how women can advance in management in a largely male-dominated profession and make a difference. And I think I would have had a harder time answering that question if she hadn't said that thank you note, because that made me feel so good that I think that's it. I think that I wouldn't say that I'm I'm not going to phrase this right, like a feminist activist in that sense, but I do think that I've always had this sense of anything you can do, I can do better. Maybe I really like Annie Oakley. But, I feel that this notion of that I shouldn't do something or I can't do something because I'm a girl has always bothered me. So to get that thank you of having, I clearly model that and show that to other people, that I don't let my gender be a barrier to the things that are important to me, was huge. So I think that's it. I think that's what I want. I want my nieces in particular to see that, there's nothing they can't do because they're a girl.
Yeah. Before you were at the Justice Department, what was your job? Where were you?
I worked with a small consulting firm, so doing a lot of government work, but just on a much smaller scale.
So have you run into barriers yourself in terms of where you've felt like you were being stereotyped or isolated or pushed aside because you were a girl?
I don't think in formal settings, like I've never felt institutionally barred from doing something. And I mean, maybe that's partially growing up entirely post-Title IX, right? I don't know. But definitely the sense of being in large meetings where, my hand isn't seen, or I'm not tall either, right? So it's like I'm the only girl in the room, and I'm shorter than everybody else. I feel like everybody just talks over my head physically, not intellectually. That kind of stuff, where it's like, yes, fine, move on. But that's much more at an individual level than at a organizational or institutional one. I'm sure that part of that is being a white woman with an easy to pronounce name probably helps too. I suspect that my experience of not feeling systematic gender barriers is not representative of everybody. But yeah, so it's not organizational. It's the way in which sometimes individual people seem dismissive, or more of they respond with platitudes and not with serious engagement. So I have run into that.
You mentioned that somebody had left a card or a note when they were leaving their job, thanking you for the role model that you had been. To what extent did that message define, or how pronounced is it in terms of the legacy gift that you would like to leave, particularly to women who might be influenced by you? How would you summarize the gift that you would like to give?
I think it's to model the behavior that I hope other people will. I'm frustrated when I see women and girls sell themselves short and not give their organizations or their communities a chance to see what they're capable of doing. I don't want people to not try for things. I want people to know it's okay to miss the mark, to fail at a task, to not achieve a goal, to fall down 75 times in an hour. Like, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you are a failure and that you're not worthy of taking up public space. I think I want people to occupy space, and if I can model a way to be present and be value added to whatever it is I'm doing.
So that metaphor of falling down, you're a skater, and
Yes.
you said you fall down a lot in
lot.
the process. To what extent have you really intentionally seen that experience as something that has influenced decisions, or when you have failed, or when you've screwed up, or you've messed up in some way?
It's huge, and it's something that I've discussed with skating friends over the years as adults, like looking back on our skating careers. A lot of my friends that I met in the rink are still my friends today. And we all talk about how we don't have a fear of messing up in the same way that we see in some of our other friends and colleagues that don't skate. And we think it's we joke all the time that, you fall down, you get up and you do it again. Or you're at a competition, you fall down, the music does not stop. You can't get off the ice. You have to keep going, even if you fall down 7 times in that program. And what your coaches try to teach you when you're growing up is that even if you fall down 10 times in this program, you are still better than all the people who didn't get on the ice.
Wow.
And I think that's really what all of us took away from the sport. Also, when I was young, although this has changed in the figure skating testing structure, it used to be pass-fail. I have one test that I took multiple times. It's called the Argentine Tango. It was not my friend. I will joke with other skaters that I failed the Argentine Tango 3 times, but I retook it 10, because at one point they came along and they changed the wording from pass-fail to pass-retry. And I understand why they did that, and I do think there is value in that. This is a sport that little kids participate in. But I had taken tons of tests that I'd passed, I'd failed, whatever, throughout my career. And I think, I learned to be a good failure in a way that didn't minimize me. It didn't mean that I should go home and never put on skates again. It meant I needed to go back and work harder.
I know you're now also a judge, correct? As a judge, do you then interact after a match? Is it a match?
A competition.
Competition.
We do sometimes. So there's 2 types of judges. They're the ones that are sort of the style and quality judges. And then there's what's called technical panel that are identifying elements, and whether they are completed according to the rules. That's the side that I sit on. But we call them critiques with skaters during preseason competitions, so that they can learn more about what they can do to improve and how they can increase their scores and as they work towards the qualifying season. So you do get to talk to the kids about the technical things they're doing and where they might not have achieved features they were trying for, or particularly when you're learning jumps, you sometimes don't rotate them fully in the air, and so they turn on the ice, and there's a penalty that you pay in the scoring system for that. And so, sometimes you do get a skater that comes in and they've just had a atrocious skate.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I always try to do is say, something along it was just a bad day, it was just an off day, or, it looked like you borrowed somebody else's feet today, or something to basically say, even if I don't know, that says to them, I believe that this is not I believe that you are capable of much more than this, that some days we are totally off and it's like you can't stand up to save yourself, right? Like there's, and to know that that's okay and that I still value and appreciate them being there. And, you'll try to find the things of saying like, and you kept trying, you went for the next jump just as hard as the one before and you didn't give up in the program, and that's important. I think the other thing is that I enjoy judging. It's a volunteer position, but I love watching the kids work through the season and see how much it means to them, and I want them, when I get the opportunity to critiques, to understand that I value the time that they've put in and that I appreciate watching them. They're all amazing for doing something like that,
right,
and putting themselves out there to be judged. That's the funny thing, we call them judges, but you never really think about the fact that I am intentionally signing up and giving somebody money so that they can stand in judgment of me. Like, really?
Right.
But I think that's huge. I don't fear judgment in that sense, because I've always had 9 people who tend to not look all that happy, but what I've learned is it's because we're cold watching you, right? When I taught for a little bit, I had a group of students. They were going to go and take their very first test, and it was clear that they'd heard from older skaters in the rink. The judges are scary, that they look mean. You're going to see a judge, and they're going to be wearing a very big puffy coat and a scarf, maybe a hat, and you'll only be able to see their eyes, and they'll look a little bit squinty. And I said, you just have to remember, they're cold. And all these little kids said, okay.
It's a powerful statement you made, is it, when you made the observation that you can fall down 10 times, but at least you're on the ice and where other people are not engaged. And so that's something to either celebrate or recognize or validate. That's an important value.
Yeah.
Where did you learn that? Did somebody say that to you and give you that instruction?
I think in pieces. I definitely had competitions as a kid that were disastrous, that I had been training really well, and I showed up and you just feel like, you sort of get out there and in the warm-up that, ooh, I'm off, I'm not right, and there's a piece of you that wants to just say, forget it, I'm not going to skate today and let me scratch. But, my coaches were like, no, we compete and you're going to try your hardest. And if it's a disaster, it's a disaster. It's one competition. So I think there always was, and one of the things that, they would say is that you've beaten all the people that didn't show up.
Yeah.
In fact, on score sheets at skating competitions, people who withdraw are still listed at the bottom of the score sheet. So if you finish, last in that group, but 3 people withdrew, their names are below you.
Wow.
Now, that's a function of the accounting system,
Right.
not meant to be
Some lesson.
But I think, when I think if you have good coaches and they're working with, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, they can use that instructively to say, but you beat those people.
Yeah.
They didn't even put their skates on today.
Yeah. Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the second habit, he says, living with the end in mind. You're young, so you may not have done a lot of thinking about this yet, but when life comes to an end, what do you want people to say about you?
I'll tell you, I've been thinking about this very hard for the last 2 days since you mentioned doing this podcast, and I'm not entirely sure, and I don't think that's a function of my current age, so much as that I've realized that I would not describe myself as fly by the seat of the pants. I certainly, if I'm taking vacation, 6 months of planning goes into it, but I don't plan my life in big chunks that way. I have always wanted to be open to what's coming and to focus my energy on doing what's in front of me to the best of my ability. So even when in job interviews, people say, where do you envision yourself in 5 years? I always I don't know, and I don't want to say I fear, but there's a tiny piece of me that's like, if I say that I want to be this in 5 years or in 10 years, A, what am I going to think if I don't achieve that? And then B, what if in my focus to trying to get there, I miss out on something amazing that I hadn't considered? So I think in a weird way, even though I like to be very methodical and organized and planning things, I don't like to spend too much time focused on it.
Yeah, so you're not worried about it.
Yeah, I'm really not.
They're going to say what they're going to say anyway.
Exactly. I think that's really it. And I kind of made myself laugh thinking that I'm like, wow, I apparently live in the moment. I'm very organized about that moment.
Yeah.
So I'm very good at planning tomorrow and maybe next week, but not next year.
So this next question really focuses on the legacy that your family leaves behind. I know that in my family, we had this ridiculous, if not morbid, practice of, when my parents were alive, we went around the house and we put tags on things that we were going to take. And the joke became, if I found my sister's tags on something, I would move their tags. And so it became, everybody would enter the house and all of a sudden inspect the tags. What would you want to take from your parents' house at the end of their journey? And what do you want to hold on to that would be symbolic?
Gosh, although it actually is already gone from the house, but I think at least symbolically, growing up, we had a baby grand piano. My mom was a lifelong pianist. Her grandparents had basically informed her she would be a concert pianist, so before she went to seminary, she has a degree in music. And I suffered through, I don't know, a couple months of piano lessons before I figured out that having an expert pianist in the house listening to you practice is no fun at all. I figured out that my mom could not play a woodwind to save her life, so I took up the flute, so she couldn't critique. But there was always a piano in the house, and so there was always music in the house. My dad doesn't read music, but he plays guitar by ear. They were both huge singers. I think if I could have that piano back, that's what I think I would want, even though for me it would be furniture. I think just that both of them are such avid musicians, and that music was such a big part of their life, that's what I would want. And I think from their actual current possessions, there would be music-related things that I would keep. Like they both have guitars, they both have some amazing record collections.
Yeah, so
that
piece of that legacy was important when you were growing up. So taking a line out of the movie Leap Year, in your own house, if your house were to catch on fire, what one thing would you grab besides your cat?
The cat would be out the door before me, actually. Get me out of here. In figure skating, there are test medals that you get when you achieve test, and they start off as pins and they get fancier the higher levels you go. I have one from my last free skating test, my senior free. We call it earning your gold medal. And that's what I would grab, because to me it is symbolic of my best day. I had stopped competing. I'd gone off to college. I didn't even take my skates with me. And I'd stopped competing at the junior level. And I came home from school one summer and I decided that I should finish what I started. I don't like leaving things undone. So I should take that last test. And so I had 9 weeks to put together a program, figure out how to get through all these jumps, get my feet back underneath me, get in shape. The program was 4 minutes and 10 seconds long, which doesn't sound really long, except go sprint for 4 minutes and 10 seconds and occasionally do a jump in the middle and land on a knife. I spent 9 weeks trying desperately to get to the point where I'd feel good about this test. I didn't do a single clean program run through the entire summer. I was, frequently having breakdowns of I can't do this, I can't make this happen, my body won't cooperate, I'm exhausted. A couple days before the test, I took like a huge crash out on the ice on a jump and, split my lip, and what am I doing? This has been a waste of my entire summer, I should have gotten a job. And I got up that morning of the test, and I'm gonna go do this. All right, I get over to the rink, I warm up, my coach is, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel good.
Yeah.
My coach was one of the most calm people in my life. Nothing ever fazed him. I've since learned, now that I'm no longer a skater, that he's a nervous wreck when his people skate, but he never let you know that at the time. He's, okay, great. Let's go out, do my warm-up, still feel good? I feel great. I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna go pass this test. I'm gonna do all my jumps. And I did, I skated a clean program. It was the only one I did in the entire summer. And I was taking a second ice dance test later that day, and my coach came down the side with the judges' score sheets from the test session, and he's handed them to me, and he says, well, if you pass that Argentine tango later this afternoon, you'll be a double gold medalist in one day. And that sense of accomplishment, that I didn't take that test for my coach, I didn't take it for my parents. If anything, they were annoyed that I was not earning money, but just spending money that summer. I wasn't competing anymore, so there was nobody else I needed to impress. Like, there's nobody on the planet who would have cared if I had ever taken that test, except me.
Yeah.
So I frequently wear that medal as a necklace, and that's what I would want to take, because that was the day I did something for me and for nobody else that was a meaningful accomplishment, that was a capstone to something that had been such a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
So I would take that.
One of the things that really strikes me, and I've never said this to you before, but a lot of what you've shared today speaks into this. You and I worked together in the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing.
Yeah.
And we had 11 stalwart prima donnas that we had to take through that process. For me, it was one of the most important things I think I've ever done professionally. Your role was such a critical, important role, and you were in the background. Mm-hmm. And I never saw you once assert to be in front. In fact, I think you defer to other people's credit. I mean, there are times when I've been in places and been introduced as if I wrote the whole report. And all I did was facilitate and give insights and input. And I've always thought of your generosity in terms of that whole process, in terms of your colleagues, the people that you're working with, the task force. Do you see that as a part of who you are?
I think in having you say it, yes. I would say I've always been like that. I think as long as the people who I need to know my contributions, recognize them, that's what matters to me, not the broader public. I mean, I do have a book with my name on the cover that I'm pretty proud of. Yeah. No, I think, it's kind of funny, right, that figure skating is a solo sport, and one that you're out on a huge stage by yourself wearing something very sparkly and eye-catching. But I've never been drawn to being the solo star. I have always worked on, the crews of things in the theater, or I like to keep teams organized and on task. I'm one of those, like, we've got a timeline, let's go. But I think then what I get out of it is I know that those people know that they accomplished the goal because I was there. Yeah. And I think that's...
Well, I know in that process, most of the people that I talk to know that process would never have been done without you.
Yep. See, that I like to know.
That is often, I hear that. You're a reader?
Yes.
Name a book that's had a huge influence, either fiction or nonfiction, that influenced you.
It's funny, I actually had a conversation with somebody the other day that I was saying I always hated growing up when people would say, what's your favorite book? I'm like, it's always the one I'm reading. Yeah. And I know I can say that because you like books as well. I think I really think it's more of a category of book than a particular book. I'm drawn to biography as a group, and I don't think I would have. It was more that I can now see that I have a huge shelf of them.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, I apparently like reading about people, and the type of biography that appeals to me is the person that is highly unusual. I mean, obviously, I studied Tudor England. I have a ton of books on Elizabeth I and Mary Tudor and Mary Queen of Scots. Like, these are people doing something really unusual. I think that kind of thing appeals to me. People who try something a little bit different, a little out of the ordinary. My dad would probably answer the question by telling you the most important book to my life are the Little House on the Prairie books, because I read them till they fell apart as a kid. But I think that's, in many respects, Laura Ingalls Wilder is representative of somebody doing something different and out of the norm for her time. So I think that's it. I like the biographical stories of people who have not taken the path of least resistance or done just the ordinary thing to blend into the masses. I think I admire people who do that, who can stand up and be different and be okay with that.
Yeah.
That's something I find hard in a way, but it's something I strive to do, and that's what I'm attracted to, right?
Yeah.
So I like reading books about people who are able to not worry about how the rest of the world thinks about them and say that this is what's important to me. So I like reading biography. I mean, you get a lot of that in fiction, right? Lots of fiction is aspirational characters of things, and I think what I like about biography is this notion that there really are people who do that.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking with Deb Spence, friend, colleague, ice skater, works at the U.S. Department of Justice, and we thank you for taking this time to talk about your legacy. You've inherited a great legacy, and you're giving a great legacy.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. We want to hear from you. We want to get your ideas and your opinions. I have a new book that corresponds with the Legacy Project titled The Seeker, Bring Me the Horizon. You can find a copy of it on Amazon or your preferred book distributor. The book corresponds closely with these podcasts. The podcast episode was produced by Matt Erickson and edited by Carissa Erickson. The music is by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode of our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build a future.